Hello and welcome to the Ferret Business Podcast. I am your host, Yemmy the Ferret, aka Yemmy, aka DJ Yemmy. And with me today is a live streamer, and boy, I don't even know how many words I can use to describe what this person does. Let's just say, I don't even know. Yeah, why don't you describe what you do on your channel other than live stream, because I'm drawing a blank.
Now I'm curious.
Inspirational videos, right? And
yeah, I'm curious to know what you see that you can't describe it. That's.
It's hard to describe the different like you have your life extension stuff, the transhumanism, the little videos that are short. That's just an inspirational quote. It's a lot of stuff to do with inspiration. And hashtag life is amazing, right?
Pretty much sums it up. The best way I can describe it when some people ask is the channel's like 85% entertainment and then 15% like what's the meaning of life and trying to actually answer the question.
Perfect. Well, anyways, we welcome onto the stream. I lost my notes. Feline Longmore, from the channel Life is Amazing. I'm just getting back from break, and I'm trying to get back into the groove of things. So I'm sorry if it's a little clunky right now. I promise we'll get better.
Sometimes the best teacher is experience. So actually, usually it is.
That's true. That is very true.
So on your end, I see that you do gaming and you do podcasts. Is there anything that you would add to that, or is that pretty much it?
That sums it up. Short, sweet, to the point. I also make montages every so often.
When did you actually start doing it, and what made you decide to start doing it?
I actually started YouTube in let's see, it was 2008 on a different channel, and that channel I was doing like commentary videos of just me sitting in front of the camera and talking about a topic for like 30 minutes. And you have an idea and you go with it, and then you name your channel after it, and then you're like, I don't like this idea anymore. So I was stuck with a name, but I ended up leaving that channel because I wasn't making content that I liked. I was kind of taking content for other people and making clips and video clips about mashing them all together. The channel's still up, but I deleted most of the videos on it. But I moved over here. Oh man, it was probably last November. I think I started this channel up. So yeah, it's been almost a year now.
You talked about this before, because that sounds really familiar.
I'm sure I talk about it everywhere. Like, when anyone asks me how long I've been on YouTube, it's like, well, technically been on since, like, 2008.
I've had an account since, like years ago, but I never did anything with it. I just had it. Then I was like, no, I'm going to start doing something, and then I started doing it, and I'm like, it works, I want to do more, and, like, I actually had to do channels separately because when I started putting gaming content on the Magic channel, like I noticed like a decrease in the amount of subscriptions, and then what I realized is it was a clash of audiences, and it's like I should make a separate channel for this. And now this channel is doing significantly better, but it's much easier to market when like everybody's uploading gaming channels,
right?
Whereas for Magic, like it's harder to market it when like like where do you go if you're not on YouTube, to get people to check out what you're doing.
Exactly.
And it's like, oh yeah, like on Twitch, like the thing on Twitch, because like I started on Twitch before, and the only reason why I have any success on Twitch isn't because I mastered Twitch. It was just because I already had a name in Magic the Gathering, so when I started doing it, it was much easier, and the audience that is Magic the Gathering is largely on Twitch because that's where they watch the content every weekend when they do opens and GPs and stuff. So it's kind of a situation of going where the people are, and because of that community, the people are already there. But outside that community, like now, obviously, if you're into gaming, you probably know about Twitch, but like there's other things on Twitch that they have channels for. Like, it wouldn't surprise me if there's like a Sunday morning worship service church thing on Twitch. There's probably a channel for everything at this point.
Yeah, I think there actually is. I think I was browsing live streams, and there are churches out there who actually live stream the whole. What would you call it? The service, I guess you would say.
The only thing I find interesting about that is, like, if I was to go down that road, does an atheist church is that like a thing? I don't think it's a thing.
Yeah, I don't think we have a church, but I do think that people think that atheism and Scientology are the same thing. So there's that road people go down.
I guess if they were the same thing, they wouldn't have different names. So
well.
So
I mean, Obamacare was called two different things, and people didn't know that they were the same thing. And I guess this is kind of the opposite,
I'm more focused than usual on the conversation, because usually when you're playing games, it's like, I'm playing a game. All right, I'll essentially pseudo-pause it, and then talk to chat.
Right.
This is a different type.
So would you say that's the hardest part? Would you say that's the hardest part of live streaming, is trying to interact with chat while playing a game, or is it more trying to get your message across while live streaming, or do you not combine the two? That's why I should ask first. Do you combine your message for the channel with the live streaming?
Not so much, because I don't want to you don't want to be like a preaching or whatever where people don't want it. People come here for the gaming. I'll talk about stuff as stuff comes up. Like, usually, like, talking about stuff, it's like I'm reading chat, I'm interacting with chat, someone says something, and then I respond to it. I'm not like, hey, everybody, what are you doing to not die anymore today? I don't really...
Yeah. Well, that's understandable. So, is the hardest part of live streaming trying to manage between talking to chat and playing your game? Because you have a lot more subscribers than me, and it's not too bad for me right now.
Not yet. Right now, it's fine. The thing I'm worried about is chat moving so fast that I can't interact and read everyone's messages because it's going too fast to keep up with. And I've had times on Twitch where I had, 50 people, 100 people in there, and they're all chatting, and it's going so fast that I cannot keep up with it, and that sucks. And as long as it's going slow, like if it's under 20 people, it's fine. Between 20 and 50, it depends on the conversation. And like 50 plus, it almost doesn't matter. If enough people are talking out of that, it starts moving pretty fast.
Yeah, a lot of times people just kind of talk amongst themselves too, instead of trying to talk to you for what it's worth.
I've seen some of the bigger channels that have like multiple, several million, and like Markiplier will stream, and you go to chat, and you're like, yeah, there's no point in typing anything. No one's ever gonna see this. This is just a collage of information that's literally coming out faster than you could read it in a lifetime if it kept going.
And you start to wonder if anyone actually reads through every single comment. Do you think anyone actually sits there and goes, okay, I gotta scroll back, or after the stream is done, they go for the live replay and they just like read everyone's comment? Do you think there's anyone like that?
On the replay, maybe. I guess it depends on what's said. But I imagine that after a certain point, there's so much information, you just have to let it go, and you just focus on the stream at that point,
right?
And talking with people kind of as an audience, or as a whole, like. And that's what you do. Like, that's what musicians do when they go on stage and say, hey, we're here to play, and then they just play their music, and then they're done.
And everyone screams, and it's all good.
But either way. But so far, this has been interesting, and I guess, for the most part, I'm just screwing around playing video games, but, like, my hope is that, because, like, I guess the question that a lot of people will be asked sometimes is, like, what do you want to do with your life, before you die? And it's like, what if what I want to do with my life is change the question so that you don't have to die. Like, you can live indefinitely. Not forever, unless you wanted to. But, like, I'm greedy and selfish, and I want to see everything that's going to happen, and it's like, actually, you probably don't. There's probably some things that are going to suck in a few hundred years, like if aliens or an asteroid or a super volcano goes off or a super flu kills, like, half the people.
Right.
It might suck that. So, but I'd like to at least be here long enough so that, people die, and when they do, they don't want to die yet, and I guess it's just part of life. You just have to accept it, or change it. And it's like, well, we possibly could change it depending on what they're doing. You look at the amount of time that people were living so many hundred years ago versus now, and, people are already benefiting from, different forms of life extension. Like malaria and tuberculosis were killing people like crazy 100 years ago. Now it's cancer and heart disease, and be next is next. And, I find it fascinating when, I ask people and talk to people about, living indefinitely, and almost all of them say no. And I think one of the biggest reasons why so many people say no is just because they don't even think not only do they not think it's possible, they basically know, like, there's no way that could even happen. So why fantasize about it? Why torture yourself?
Mm-hmm.
If you take cell phones back 300 years, they would think you were an alien or something. They'd be like, what is this?
Yeah.
They couldn't even conceive something like that. And now something that couldn't even be conceived, in order for something to be impossible, you have to conceive it first. If you can't even conceive it, it's beyond impossible. And now we have stuff in front of us every day that's, was deemed impossible at one point. If you go far back enough in time, were we even possible? I mean, obviously we were, because we're here now.
Right.
But, and like defining people is another one that's interesting, because if people are limited, change the definition of that word or call ourselves something different, because people is just what we are at this moment in time. It doesn't include, what we were before and what we're going to evolve into, whatever that's going to be. And I don't know why. I have a hard time not looking at the bigger picture and trying to see everything, that I can observe, I guess.
So
I think if that helps at all.
Well, what do you think the most important part of human history has been so far, and where do you think it can go with the life extension techniques that you were talking about?
Just the other day, there was an article posted where they it was on Reddit's Futurology, and it was they succeeded last year in March. They succeeded reversing the DNA damage over time of cells in mice. Like, essentially, it's a fountain of youth for mice. Like, okay, that's nice for mice. But what about us? Yeah, now they're doing clinical trials at a hospital in Boston. And I guess yesterday or a couple days ago, they made an article. Yeah, we successfully reversed aging in lab-grown human cells. So it's like, okay, that that's closer than mice, but that's still in a lab, and it's a controlled environment. And, they're lab-grown human cells, so it's like, that might not actually mean anything. Like, if somebody has a company and they're like, yeah, we have a patent. We have, 4 patents for this product. And it's like, oh, well, that's really nice. What are your patents? And then their patents have nothing to do with the product. It's just, the way that they're packaging it. They have patents for that. And it's like, well, it doesn't have anything to do with the product, so why are you saying that? And it's because it's a selling point, You could have 1 million subscribers, but if no one's watching your content,
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So, what would you say is the most important part of human history so far, then?
The most important part?
Yes. What would you say is the single most important part of human history, besides from us coming out of a cave and being like, hey, there's a world out here?
Important part of human history? That is. It depends on what that pertains to. That's most important part as it pertains to our survival.
Yeah, would you say the development of vaccines, or maybe the atomic bomb? I'm not sure.
I mean, there's a lot of things that are probably equally important in one way or another. Whatever it took for us to evolve into what we are. That's important, or we would have never made it this far.
Right.
There's things, it also depends on human history.
It's a lot.
I don't know I don't actually know what the answer is to that question. There probably is something more important than anything else. And I imagine it's something that's so far back that nobody even knows it happened, because it's just before history. It's
right. It's before.
The important thing in human history was some really crazy battle that happened, between life forms before people became people and sentient. And the most important part of our history is, something that, we'll never know. That's probably the right answer, but that is a terrible answer.
Sounds good to me, I actually wanted to talk about 2 different cults that are in America right now. And the first one is called the Heaven's Gate cult. And they believe that aliens follow the a comet that comes to Earth every 2,000 years, and that Jesus was an alien, and that was the last time that they came, and now 900 years from now, they're going to come again. What do you think of that?
I know about that one, and I thought that was over. Do you remember hearing about that? Actually, do you remember hearing about the Heaven's Gate back in the late 90s with the Hale-Bopp comet?
I didn't hear about that, but I did hear about some musical artists taking their logo for an album cover, and actually it just happened again with a artist named Little Uzi Vert.
Yeah, back in the late 90s, these people, it was like a suicide pact, and like 14 out of 15 people...
Oh, and they ate applesauce, right? And they died. Or apple juice. They drank apple juice, right?
For that part, but I just remember that they were wearing Nike shoes because of the logo.
Yeah.
And, yeah, that was like 20 years ago.
Right.
When he said Heaven's Gate, I'm like, this can't be the same one. That was 20 years ago. That's still going. That's incredible.
Yeah, they left a few people behind to maintain the website. But yeah, they did actually, I believe it was, they drank apple juice or ate applesauce with poison in it, and that's how they committed suicide.
To me, every religion is a cult. It's just that, the bigger ones are called religion, and, like a cult... A religion is just a cult that's successful, essentially. And, a cult is, they're both essentially the same thing, but usually cults are like, yeah, there's 20 of us living in a house and we've been doing this for 15 years, versus a religion where it's like, yeah, we believe this because et cetera, X, Y, Z. Mm-hmm. But either way, that not to take away from the way you ordered it, it's just, I just look at things really weird. So.
That's fine. And there's also another, I don't know if they're a cult or if they just believe this, but there's also one that believes that aliens actually formed life on Earth as we know it. What would you say to those people?
What would I say to them? I probably wouldn't have anything to add to that. I'd probably just... there's nothing for me to add to that. I wouldn't say that they're right or wrong because, the only absolute... Uh-oh, that's bad. Stream might have stopped.
Yep, it's buffering on my end.
Okay, it's reconnecting.
There it is.
That was odd. I think the only thing I know for sure, like more than anything else, is how much I don't know. Because every question answered just accompanies more questions. If it's like, okay, we know the answer to, what's 1 + 1? 2. Okay. You can just keep going with that. Okay, well, what's 2 + 2? It's like numbers. You can just keep going with it. Mm-hmm. And, it's kind of like everything is like a spider web of information. It's like you learn one thing, but it's like, well, how'd that get there? And what does this mean? It's like, technically, I don't think anything means anything until people put meaning into it. Like the question, what's the meaning of life to me, is a trick question. Because if you keep trying to, find there's no inherent meaning as far as we know. So, it's just, your life is, if you want, a better question to ask is like, if you could have your life mean whatever you want, what would you have it mean? And that gives, the person being asked, the ability to answer it in the way that they want and focusing on what they want. And generally, how people work is generally, it's based on what they want. Outside of circumstances we can't control. Like, the sun comes up every day, not because of us, it just does.
That's actually a really good question. I actually like that. I like that. And it kind of takes the perspective of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and it's like, I guess 42 isn't the answer to everything.
I mean, it could be the answer.
Yeah, it could be.
But, what does it mean? And it's like, technically, I don't think anything means anything, and, and like, I don't think people need anything until you want something first either. Like, people say, well, you need money to survive. It's like, technically, you don't. You want something first, and there's people that survive every day without any income at all. Kids in houses are growing up and stuff because of their parents, and they're indirectly benefiting from the system, but they are still, but it's through other people. Like, people are the reason why money even works in the first place. If people stopped accepting currency the way that they did, it would just be pieces of paper and, minerals or whatever the heck the composition of gold and stuff is. I don't know all that stuff.
One other question I had for you today is, if you could go back in time and discover one thing that people have questions about, like, let's say you can go back in time and see if Jesus really existed, or maybe you can go back in time and see, if Hitler really did kill himself, or maybe it's all just a ruse. What would you go back and find out?
Go back in time? The problem is I'd probably go so far back that I don't think I'd be able to return.
Well, let's say you could go back and forth once. Like, you could go back in time, figure out what you wanted, and then you'd have to come back without changing anything. But you'd have new knowledge.
If you can go back and... Well, see, if I could travel through time, I wouldn't go in the past. I'd go in the future. But that wasn't the question.
Yeah.
So if I could go back in time, I'd... Every moment's an opportunity. You don't know which ones are the most important. So, like, you know, what do we already know? It's like, we already know about different religions, different prophets, and all that stuff. So anything that we're taught, like, I'm not worried about confirming or you know, or disproving something. You know, I'd probably, I don't know. That's a really good question. The biggest thing is, like, even if Jesus did exist or any of those, you know, from back then, you know, it's so long ago that it doesn't really pertain to our world the way that it is now. Like, there's people debating over what really happened in World War II, and that was less than 100 years ago. So if people can't even get that right in today's society, like, how do you even know any of that stuff from back then is, you know, accurate? And it's like, it's, you know, if it works, and that's the reason why it works for people, is because they say it works for them and they want it to work, because, you know, the ultimate, you know, the answer to, like, well, what if there's no point or meaning? I don't know why this is important to people, but it is. But people need to know that their life has meaning and purpose, and that, you know, you're going to go somewhere nice when you die. People need this for some reason. I have no idea why, but I'm really weird, so that's probably why I don't understand it.
Well, I think it comes from a place of fear, the fear of the unknown, you know?
That is understandable, but, like, you can manipulate that and 180 it and go, well, if there's no meaning or purpose as to why we're here, then we just got really, really lucky and we shouldn't even be alive. That's something to freaking celebrate. And that means that we really can do whatever the hell we want with our lives. We just have to allow ourselves to try. And obviously, you know, some barriers are harder than others. If you're doing something against the law, you're going to have issues. Right. You know, but, you know, and generally people don't like doing stuff that's against the law. There's a reason why the law is there anyway, so.
Let's flip the question I asked earlier. If you could go forward in time, like, let's say you get cryogenically frozen a la Futurama style, and you go ahead 1,000 years in the future, what do you think you would see when you come out of that cage? Or cage, whatever you want to call it, vault, coffin, whatever you want to say it is.
There is a facility in Scottsdale, Arizona, and for $200,000 you can be cryogenically frozen right now.
Yeah, I think I heard that story about the girl who had cancer, and she decided to freeze herself until they found a cure for cancer or something like that, which is, you know, a nice sentiment, but we'll see where that goes. We'll probably never see that.
For her cancer, and now they got to find the cure for her body coming back.
Yeah,
so now
yeah.
Problems. You know, but either way, going forward, have you ever heard of the mini world's interpretation of quantum mechanics?
No, I have not.
Interpretation says that for anything that can happen actually does happen and plays out in its own separate parallel timeline for each different obtainable result that can occur, which means that for everything possible that can happen is actually going to happen. So if you go forward in time, you're not seeing what's going to happen as it pertains to, like, versus what doesn't happen, because everything's going to happen. What you're actually seeing is which timeline, you know, is the results that will be the conclusion that you experience. And if you go back in time, you're essentially, it's kind of like a fork, essentially. If you're at the end of a fork, you're at, you know, 4 different points. But if you're at the beginning of the fork, you're only at 1. So if you travel one way, you know, it can only be one result. Whereas if you travel forward, it's multiple possibilities. And how you would manipulate that to see the results you want, I don't know. I don't know if it would be random. I don't know enough about, you know, the theories of time travel to answer that. But if you can control where you want it to go, then you'd want to see something positive. And if you couldn't, then it would be random. Right. And then it'd be risky, because you might go somewhere where the Earth ain't here no more.
And then you're just floating in space, and that's it. But let's change the... so instead of, like, just snapping forward in time, let's say you are cryogenically frozen, and you can somehow be alive in 1,000 years. What do you think you would wake up and see? What do you think, like, would the world have changed a lot? Do you think it would be relatively the same? Do you think we'd have flying cars and aliens? So what do you think would happen if you woke up in that situation?
That is a tough question because there's so many variables with that much time that the possibilities are possibly infinite. So what I'd have to do to answer that question as best I could is base it on what I know now. I mean, people have been here for a while. So I imagine people are still going to be here. Hopefully we haven't gone backwards. Chances are we probably won't. You know, it's possible that something crazy could happen. And, like, there could be a lot less people because of some cataclysmic event. That's a really tough question.
It is.
I guess what I'd like to see is, you know, a thousand. I'd like to see things better than they are.
Right. I would kind of like to see a united world instead of it just being countries. You know, I think that would help a lot with the planet.
Yeah, it's kind of like, you know, like all countries have provinces and states and regions, and each region has cities and cities have communities, you know, but we're all part of the same planet. You know, the whole save the world cliche line, you know, all that stuff, you know, it has merit because, you know, it makes sense. And I saw a thing recently where they said that the amount of resources that we're burning up as people we're exceeding burning up a year's worth of resources in less than 1 year's time. And if you continue at that rate, obviously you're going to have some problems. But it doesn't take new information into account that hasn't been created yet. For all we know, we can get to a point where we can, like, manipulate, you know, trees or photosynthesis or something to where it's like, yeah, we're just going to replace the forest in 5 years with this new technique that we are doing through science. You know, and it's like, all right, so we solved that problem. What's next? You know, and when people talk about, when I talk about, you know, people living indefinitely, the first thing people say is overpopulation and food. And I'm like, one problem at a time, man. We get there.
Yeah, that was one of the concerns that I had thought of. Not the food part, but the concern about overpopulation. Because already, like, I decided not to have kids with my fiance because, I mean, let's face it, the world is getting overpopulated, and I don't want to add to that. Do you think that living forever would affect the numbers on the planet, like, positively or negatively?
It's prepared for. If it's not prepared for correctly, there will be more problems. Prevention is the best cure. I do know that you can look to some of the bigger countries as an example, like China and India, over 1 billion people, and they're still around. And China's been over 1 billion for quite a while.
It's crazy. It's crazy to think like that, because it's like, you look at the map and you go, wow, 1 billion people live here, and it's crazy.
They say like half the world's population basically live in South Asia, between like China, India, and some of the countries going into Indonesia. That's like half the world is in this like area, and the other half is like everywhere else.
Yeah,
except Antarctica.
It is crazy. Yeah, except for Antarctica. Yeah, poor Antarctica. Huh.
In either case, I'd like to see us get to a point where, you know, and like the problem with, you know, living indefinitely is it's more than one problem. You know, there's multiple things that cause death, like road injuries and stuff related to traffic accidents is in the top 10. It's like 9th or 10th on average. When you look at different years, it's almost always in the top 10, around 9th or 10th. You know, so it's like, well, how do you fix that one? It's like, well, they're working on self-driving cars. I don't know if that's going to be good or bad, but we'll find out. So, you know.
So I wanted to quickly talk about interview you did on your second channel called Magic is Amazing, and you interviewed Ballsy, Ballsy the channel fireball, ball of fire, fireball, ball.
You saw that?
Yeah, I actually watched it while I was preparing for your interview, and I just thought it was a funny, amusing video, and I was wondering, like, how in your mind, like, since you can literally only ask yes or no questions, like, how did you come up with the questions? Did you think about it beforehand, or was it on the spot? You know, how'd that process go?
I talked to the guy responsible for making it, and I said, you know, I've got a camera with me, but I'm going to do psychic entertainment on the floor that weekend, and I wasn't able to do it because I left my tripod at home. But I was like, you know, I got my camera with me. You know, if someone wants to hold up a camera for like a minute, I can do an interview with us and get something out of the weekend. And so I did it, and like, it was a couple hours, later after asking, and so I had time to think about it, and I realized I have to ask yes or no questions because of what I'm talking to. And so I had a few hours to think about it, and I came up with a few questions, and I asked a few people if they could think of anything that would be amusing, and then I just did it, and it was just something for fun. And all this Magic the Gathering stuff, it's not gaming, and mostly it's just me watching paint dry because that's what I do for a living anyway.
So how did you get into Magic the Gathering? Because I was actually a Yu-Gi-Oh person when I was a kid. I kind of grew out of it. So how did you get into Magic the Gathering?
I guess the same way anyone else does. You're introduced to the game at one point, you decide that you're going to play, and then you do. Then you start playing locally, because it usually starts like this for most people. You learn about the game through a friend. Hey, I'm playing this game. You want to play? All right, cool. And then you're just like, hey, I really like playing this game. Let's go to like a local game store, and they do Magic once a week for what we're doing. We'll play that. And then sometimes people are like, oh yeah, I want to get good at the game. Tournaments, and then out of those people, you get some people who are like, oh, there's going to be a big event this weekend. There's going to be 1,000 people here, and we're going to play Magic and top 8 prizes and yada yada and all that stuff. So some people will go to that. I went to some of those off and on, and then after a certain point, because of things going on in my life, I decided to move from the West Coast to the East not the East Coast, but I'm in the Great Lakes region. I decided, if I moved to more events, it would be cheaper, and I could essentially even do this full time. So I started doing it full time for a couple of years, playing, and then in doing it, I had to support it because it costs money to travel, and you got to pay bills and all that stuff. So I started doing the art. I would trade cards on the floor in between rounds, and then when the format I was playing became less popular, or it essentially was past its peak, and things changed in the community where I couldn't play for a living anymore because of what I was doing. I just did Ultras full time. I've been doing that ever since as far as income goes. Mm-hmm. And then I was like, I want to do YouTube stuff. So I started putting stuff on YouTube. And then I'm like what I did first is I did Psychic Entertainment on the Floor. And I did like 4 or 5 episodes of that other channel. And they're linked on the main channel as well if people want to watch them. And I'm just doing stuff like, prediction effects, time manipulation, and mind reading and stuff like that. And, it's all trickery. Like when someone's like, yeah, I'm really a psychic. I'm like, okay, where's your $1 million? You're playing the lottery right now. That's how we all know that stuff is BS, But in either case, I started making videos out of that, and it took so much time to do, and it cut into my trade time on the floor. And I'm like, man, I really like to keep doing this, but I can't. I need to be trading on the floor. And when I'm recording and doing, effects with people, I can't, trade while I'm doing that. So I had to stop doing it. I want to still do stuff on YouTube. So I'm like, what am I already doing that I can put on YouTube? It's like, well, I'm watching paint dry for a living. I can make videos out of that. And I started doing that, and I'm like, I want to do even more. What's something else that looks like it's fun to do? And I'm like, a lot of people are doing gaming channels. Like, I don't know if everybody's tried a gaming channel at this point, but a lot of people have. And I'm like, you know what? I'll try it and see what happens. That way, what I'm doing in my spare time, I might eventually get a little bit of income for. And now I'm doing this interview. So that's how that all, I guess, came together. It's just, you think about what you want, and then you just go for it. So, and, educate yourself as best you can, and then put the time in.
So I had one more question for my side of the interview, and that is ghosts. Do you think they exist? And if you do, why?
Oh, I've never experienced anything myself. You hear stories I've heard some crazy stuff. I've heard some crazy stuff about reincarnation where like these 3-year-olds are talking about past lives and they confirm all these details, and they're like, how is this even possible? Like, there's some crazy stuff out there, but nothing's been like, as far as I know, nothing's been proven. It's like, if you're watching Ghost Hunters on the History Channel, first of all, what is that even doing on the History Channel? I don't know. Right. I don't understand that. But going back to your question, I know that anything is possible, but some stuff takes a lot of evidence, and that one, the hardest part about that one is my like, you know, the whole cliche. Yeah, it used to be a funeral home, and there was possessions that happened in the house, and so it was haunted ever since. You've heard that cliche story before,
Right.
Mother and her family grew up in one of those houses. They have stories. I was never there for any of them, but they have the stories of like seeing stuff that doesn't make sense and it being super cold in the room, and people like one of the creepiest ones that they said was her brother, my uncle, when he was like 8 or 12, you know, went up to his mom and said something or asked something, and my grandma said no or whatever. There was like, I don't know exactly what it was, but there was an interaction, some stuff was said, whatever, and then he went away. And then she went later on to go check on him to see what he was doing up, and he was like completely asleep. And when asked about it, like later, like he was like, no, I don't even know what you're talking about. So like, if that is what it sounds like, then that's like a full-on impersonation of someone that's just creepy. And like, there's stories like that. There's like, I mean, there's stuff that I can't even say because it's inappropriate. Like, there's some weird sex shit.
Well, yeah, I know. Yeah. I was listening to. Oh, okay, yeah. All right. We'll skip over the sex stuff.
I won't be specific because I like that. There's some weird stuff in there where like it is just. It's stuff that I don't even know if you'd see it in a movie. Some of it's just weird, and it's just, you know, there's. I don't have an answer for that one. I've heard enough, and I know everyone has their own reality, and for some people they accept it because to them it's just as real as gravity. So, you know, I'm not involved in that though, and until I see something or experience something that I can't, then I guess I'm safe from it for now. I know it's possible, so, you know.
All right. Well, that is the end of my side of the interview. We can keep going. I'm going to end my side of the recording, but I want to thank you once again, Feline Longmore, for coming on to the show and talking with me. Is there anything else you want to say before I end the podcast?
What's the reason that you chose the questions that you did?
Oh boy, there was the things I was most curious about, and I was really, really curious about what you thought of that cult. Because that is a recent thing that I actually discovered myself, and I was like, well, I wonder what you would think of it.
The biggest thing about that is, you know, people are there because they want to be there. Somebody's running it because they want to, like, people are there because they want to be there. That's why it's happening. And whatever they're getting out of it, if it works for them, then, you know, there's going to be cults, you know, all over the place. There's probably cults we'll never hear about that do weird stuff. There's one I heard about is like a higher society cult where they like dance in front of this owl and like some place in California, and like only males are allowed in it, and others. I mean, you hear about all kinds of weird stuff, you know, but as long as people want something, stuff's gonna keep happening. So
that is true. All right, well, I am the host, Yemmy the Ferret, and this has been another episode of the Ferret Business Podcast.